We were waiting.
Call to order the April 23rd AMATS policy meeting. It's 1:30. We have Mr. Steele and Mr. Flynn here from the Assembly. We have Mr. Vakala sitting in for Mr. Sullivan. We have Koch here, who is now the DEC. Did I say that right? Is it Koch?
Koch.
Koch. Okay, so it's Koch here, who is the DEC rep. So we have a quorum. We have in front of us Mr. Lyon doing the public involvement announcements. What we have next?
You want to roll past it, you know? You could have done it.
No, I love it.
All AMATS meetings are public meetings, and the public is invited to comment. If we have a business item, we'll have a presentation by a staff or a consultant, and at that point, the committee will be given an opportunity to discuss it. If the public is interested in testifying, please make sure to state your name for the record.
Thank you. I still could not give that speech after having heard it 50 times, so I appreciate you doing it every.
Because you didn't listen.
Yeah, okay. We have in front of us an agenda. Do I have any corrections, modifications, Mr. Lyon?
We will not be doing our informational item 6D. Jamie Acton is working on that, but she is unable to be here today.
Okay.
We'll have your website update, but we'll be next
Scratch
month.
6D from the agenda. Anything else?
Nope.
Any other proposed corrections?
Mr. Chairman, if you would be indulge the committee, perhaps Ms. Koch could introduce herself under informational items and we can learn a little more about her.
Well, how about if we do that before we even do anything after the minutes?
I'm fine with that as well.
Okay, we'll do that. Consider yourself forewarned. You're going to have to give a 30-second speech here.
You're lucky, where I work, you have to tell a story of your abject humiliation as part of your history.
Initiation.
We won't force that.
After today, you'll have a great story to tell. Would there be any further corrections or amendments to the agenda? Any objections to the agenda as presented then? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. Madam, it's your turn to give a speech.
I don't know about a speech, but I'm Denise Koch, and I'm the new Director of Air Quality at the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation. I started on April 1st, and I had, previous to this assignment, I had worked in the private sector in environmental consulting for about 5 years, but prior to that, I had also worked at DEC in the Division of Water. So I come back to DEC with kind of a broad background of water quality and some air experience that I gained in the private sector.
Okay, thank you.
May I inquire just a little bit? Which consultancy were you with?
ERM.
Okay. And you were doing air work for them?
I did a variety of work, including air work, but also some wastewater work and compliance assistance.
Great. Welcome.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the witness?
I wasn't trying to be.
Okay, thank you for your brief introduction. We'll now move to item number 4, which is approval of the minutes. Mr. Lyon?
Just real quickly, you have 3 sets of minutes there. The first set is the special meeting that we had with the Kindergarten Crossing folks. And the second set would be, right, let me just double check if I have that in the correct order. Yeah, the first set, the December 8th is the Kindergarten Crossing, and the second set, the December 17th, is when we had the folks from the Matsu Borough show up. These were joint meetings. These have gone through the technical committee, and they recommended they didn't have any problem or changes with them. So because it was a joint meeting, it made sense that both of you folks took a look at them. And then the third set is your regular set of minutes from last month. That's why you have so many.
So on the December minutes,
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I would move approval of the December 8 minutes.
okay,
Second.
moved and seconded. Any discussion about those minutes? Corrections? Seeing none, any objection to those minutes being admitted as presented? Seeing none, those minutes are approved. So we now have the December 17th minutes.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask if, I'm going to move that we postpone consideration of those minutes to next month. You know, note the AMATS website update. I had a hard time finding some of the documents, so didn't have a chance to read through these. It's a pretty involved discussion, and unfortunately, my name is featured frequently throughout it. So I'd like to make sure, just do one read, a little more thorough read through before approving.
I have a motion to postpone. Do I have a second? Moved and seconded. Any objections to Mr. Flynn's request for postponement for a month on those minutes? Seeing none, those minutes are postponed. We have in front of us now the March 26th minutes from the Policy Committee.
I'll move to approve those.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any amendments, corrections, modifications? Any objection to approval? Seeing none, those minutes are also approved. Thank you. We now have in front of us our first business item, which is the 2015-2018 TIP Administrative Modification 3 and memo.
You got it.
Okay.
A relatively simple set of changes here. There are some minor changes in the table, but the major thing that we are doing is in the table 3, the roadway section. Basically, we're swapping which project will go first between O'Malley and Abbott. So originally, we had O'Malley going first in 2015 with Abbott going later. In this case, we're changing that up. That is the suggested change to get Abbott rolling ahead first. There are some other changes that are described in the memo there, relatively minor. The other part of the allocation would be Table 10, the AMATS Payment Replacement Program. We have some projects that were removed from the table. Other than that, nothing too exciting to report on that. There's some pretty minor changes. Those projects and the dollar figures have been approved by the policy committee previously. We're just changing the schedule around, and that's why it's an administrative modification as opposed to a major amendment.
Thank you. Anyone from the public care to comment on the proposed adoption of this amendment? Seeing none. Mr. Steele. Comments, questions?
No, as long as they're still in the works, they're just
I'll make one additional comment. The O'Malley Road Abbott swap is brought about because the right-of-way acquisition on O'Malley is proceeding slower than expected. As I believe we've talked about that several times. The
Castle.
So it's not brought on by anything other than just the actual schedule that's happening to us.
There was some right-of-way issue on the other one as well, on the
Abbott?
Abbott Road up above the high school or something.
Right, and I believe that this Abbott Road piece is phase 1, which is essentially from Lake Otis to Elmore. I think it goes a little bit beyond Elmore, but it's not including the piece on Birch.
Okay.
And you're correct in your recollection, there is a problem there as well. So, having said that.
I was looking for the money to reapply somewhere else, but that's.
Boy, there's a lot of that going around
I
these days,
know.
I can tell you.
I understand.
And Mr. Chair, the TAC did recommend approval of this administrative modification at their meeting 2 weeks ago.
Thank you. Mr. Flynn?
Yeah, I got a lot of AC in here, which is something that, as you know, makes me a little bit nervous. So, Mr. Lyon, could you speak to sort of where we are and how much of our credit card we're leveraging here?
Well, if I'm correct, Mr. Campbell, but I believe we can only, the commissioner does ACs by the year, so the other ones are the planned ACs ahead of time, just as we go. But I think if that's correct, the only one we're looking at to do this year would be the money for Abbott Road in the 2015. So that's the 7.2.
I think that's the story.
So, and the 150 from Minnesota Drive. But so basically, what we're looking for is that amount to move into 2015, so we can do it this year.
So, just to make sure I'm reading all this correctly, because the reds are different than the blacks.
The reds mean they're changes from the previous
Yeah.
adopted version.
Understood. So, just so I'm clear, at this point, for 2015, we are anticipating utilizing 7.2 million-ish of 2016 funds for 2015 execution.
That is correct.
And remind me, that's out of 24 million that we have available.
Give or take, yeah. 23.7.
Is that all? Big chunk, Mr. Chairman, but I'll let it go.
Any further comments or questions?
As long as it's downtown.
Mr. Michaelis, any concerns?
No.
Do I have a motion? Please.
I'll let someone else move it.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I believe that Mr. Michaelis' motion was to approve the administrative mod number 3 as presented.
Correct.
It's been seconded. Is there any further discussion? Any objection from the committee to approval of that? Seeing none, that admin mod is approved. Thank you. Next on our agenda, I believe we have the always interesting first quarter obligation report slide.
And Mr. Chair, this is an informational item only. The changes that we had originally thought would be in the audit report were included in the admin mod, so already taken care of. Again, this is just showing how we're tracking for the first quarter. You'll see in column A there, it talks about what was approved in the original TIP in December of 2014. Column B is what we've already obligated. There are some de-obligations showing in column C. 742,000 in the roadway ones, and a little bit less in the transportation enhancements or non-motorized. And then the column D shows you what we still expect to be obligated. So the main ones that we're looking at here again would be the O'Malley Road one. The 14.3 is what was in the TIP, and that's we're only obligating a portion of that. That's for that right-of-way work that you discussed earlier. Abbott Road did not have anything in it, and we're now looking to obligate that additional 5.5 that we just discussed. And the pavement replacement originally had little over 1 million in there, and we're looking to put more in there for design starts on Post Road, Rabbit Creek Road, and some AC for Eagle River Road. So those are the main changes there. And then discussing this Smerard Road rehab, we are looking at that may slip to 2016. I think the agreement is right now that the Muni is going to do the environmental work and the right-of-way on that. And then after that part's done, it'll come over to the state to manage the rest of it in the federal program. Those are the main points in the roadway table. You go down to the bike plan, or the non-motorized table, you will see the bike plan and pedestrian plan implementation. Those are still expected to get obligated this year, still tracking well. There is room for additional monies to be absorbed into that bike plan implementation plan, or implementation program. So, if we go throughout the rest of this year in different quarterly reports and see more monies being de-obligated in other projects, this could absorb some of that money for additional projects to be implemented in that bike plan project. And everything else seems to be tracking fairly well with the program. If you look at the last page there, you'll see that about in the middle of the page, it says difference between anticipated needs and TIP in dollars and percent. It's about 1.8 million, so we're within 7.59% of the actual allocation, and we're required to be within 15% plus or minus, and obviously that's about half that, so we're tracking fairly well. And again, there are no motions to be made on this. Is just informational because you already approved those actions in the administrative modification number 3.
Okay, I think there'll probably be some discussion on the previous thing, but let me ask if there's anybody in the public sector here that would like to make any comments on this. This really isn't an action item, but if there's anybody here that wants to make a comment, feel free. Seeing none, Mr. Steele.
Yeah, I don't think we're voting on that move of funds to switch to 16. I just had informal conversation with some folks that are saying, yes, they are gonna get started on stuff, but they may move that 1.5 or whatever we have in there to 16 instead of 15, but it hasn't happened yet. So.
Right. Mr. Flynn, any comments? Mr. McGibbs? Okay, thank you for that update, Greg. Next, we have our household travel transit surveys and travel demand model.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Campbell and policy committee members. We'll make sure we have our consultant online on the telephone line here. We provided a brief overview of the household travel survey. We completed that project recently, and as you may recall, the household travel survey asked questions of individuals that were traveling throughout the Anchorage Bowl and some areas of the Mat-Su Borough. And so these are some of the results from that particular project. So,
Can you, for the record, give your name, by the way?
here we go. It'll come up
Or not?
or not.
Can you, Tracy, can you introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm Teresa Bruin. I'm a senior transportation planner with AMATS.
Appreciate it.
So we'll either wake up the projector or we'll wing it,
Okey dokey.
apparently.
Just get me around a computer and there'll be technical difficulties, right? Oh, no.
It was working at the beginning.
Teresa, is this what you're gonna do?
Yeah, and Jeff was going to provide the overview and then the summary of the results, but we're having trouble getting them online. We may
Okay,
have
do you want to
to.
start with this then? Just the paper version, if they have it?
I would, however, Jeff is giving the presentation.
Oh, he's giving this one?
Yes.
Got it.
Yes.
There you go.
Okay, there we go.
So we've got the travel demand model update. Now we just need our consultant. So hopefully he's calling in here. Hey Jeff, we're having some difficulties on our just
So it's the longest part of your meeting is as we're waiting on the phone. Short meeting.
ready to rock and roll.
Help out.
Oh, okay, all right. He tried to call in a few minutes ago and couldn't get through. So,
Again?
yeah, why don't you try again? And that was a 6067 number? That was a 6067 number, Jeff. Austin? Yes. Okay, thanks, bye.
Pete, you're in charge.
Short attention.
We over-surveyed.
See you next month.
Denise,
Hello,
I'd
this
like
is
to meet
Jeff Fracanja.
Hi, Jeff. How are you doing? As you may know, Jeff Rakonja is with RSG Incorporated, and he is the project manager for the travel demand model update, which is a separate project from the household travel survey. However, the information that will be used from the survey will be input into the travel demand model update. And the household survey, travel survey is done. It will be used to also inform the Metropolitan Transportation Plan update. So, Jeff, I will have you begin.
Okay. First, since I'm calling in remotely, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. And I want to take about, or I expect to take about 10 to 15 minutes. Is that correct?
10 minutes would be perfect.
10 minutes.
All right.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all. I would also suggest that if there are questions, perhaps funnel those to Teresa and she can sit by the microphone and relay them back to me. I've discovered that I can't always hear everyone in the room.
Okay.
Okay, having said that, let's move to slide 3, please, which simply shows the agenda of what I'm going to cover, which is really a lot of numbers. I've tried to distill some particular takeaway points into the bullets on some of the slides, and these are only highlights. Teresa mentioned I'm going to give you an overview of 2 surveys, the Household Travel Survey and the Transit On-Board Survey that AMATS funded for 2 primary purposes, the first of which Teresa already mentioned is to support the update of the AMATS travel demand model. The second of which, of course, is to support the general knowledge of how people in the region behave as they travel for your planning purposes. And I'll talk about the household survey from my point of view as a modeler first, and then I'll talk about the transit survey from my point of view as a modeler, but I'll preface those remarks by some overviews of the surveys themselves. So if we go to slide 4, as you all well know, the travelers in your region come from both the Anchorage side of the Knik Arm as well as the Matsu Borough side, so the household survey geography that was sampled includes both the green area in the map, Anchorage, and the tan area in the map, which is really what we call the Matsu Valley sub-area of the entire borough, which extends quite a bit further north. If you go to slide 5, the main takeaway from slide 5 is that within the sampled geography, we very much wanted to be sure that a couple of key populations were properly represented. Those include both low-income populations for equity analysis, as well as areas that are growing very rapidly and which therefore might not have a large population today but are expected to do so in the future. So we want to be sure that the current residents there were sampled highly enough to guarantee that our understanding of travel behaviors from those areas, and these growth areas are outlined in purple on the map, is adequate to the model update process. All right, so next slide, please, slide 6. So having talked about the geography that was surveyed, I want to give you a few highlights of the actual household travel survey process. It was basically done last fall, so it's very recent. The mechanism is to have all persons in each household that was recruited complete a diary of all trips they made for an entire day. That's all persons greater than 5 years of age. There are additional questions beyond the actual revealed travel patterns about people's attitude and behavior and typical behavior, and we'll come back to some of the data about those in a moment. There was a lot of public outreach, including provisions for translation into language groups that are prevalent in your area. One of the most important things for me is that, taken all told, the sub-areas surveyed as outlined in the maps, the recruited households constitute 2.2% of all households in the region, which is actually a very robust sample. There are folks who do this with a 1% sample, so this is very pleasing to me as a modeler and analyst. And 25% of the completed responses came from the Matsu Valley sub-area, so we have good representation of the folks on that part of the region. The table at the bottom is simply some summary of the total households that were recruited. If you go to slide 7, I want to call out just a few high-level statistics at this point. I want to remark very explicitly that these charts are taken from the unweighted survey results. So this is just the sample. These are just the folks who answered. The survey staff have already expanded this or weighted this to represent the entire population. And for the model update, we're going to be doing a lot of work with the weighted data set. And so you'll see versions of these charts that are final versions representative of the entire population in our later model documentation. So recognize that these numbers will change somewhat, probably not much, but somewhat as we head into the detailed analysis. But right now, looking across the entire sample, you can see that the majority of the trips that were surveyed used an automobile in some way, either because the traveler drove alone or because there was a carpool. About 10% of the trips in the entire sample were by non-motorized modes. There's a significant presence of school children traveling by school bus, and region-wide, the transit percentage was about 1.1%. Now, there are some other modes in more detail, so your staff can analyze this in much more detail later. These aggregations in the bullet points on the right are things that we're going to be using for the model. If you go to slide 8, this just talks about the trip purposes, in other words, why people made the trips that were surveyed and reported. Obviously, people have to go home if they've been somewhere else, so there's a large share of those. There's a robust sample of work trips, school trips, and shopping trips. We'll be doing a lot more work with this because the purpose of travel is a fundamental product of the travel demand model, so more on this later. One of the sort of stated questions that was asked was, what's your typical work mode? And this is important for the model because the work trips are very critical in the forecasting process. And the aggregate types that we're likely to use in the model are on the left. Once again, there's going to be auto. Typically, most people drive or carpool to work in your region, over 90%. This is being self-reported. For work trips, the non-motorized modes take about 4%, and transit gets closer to 2%. There's a significant van pool presence, and there are, of course, many other modes. And I just want to caution folks that all these other modes are reported because the question is, what do you typically do to go to work? There are other questions that talk about folks' travel frequency. So some of the other modes actually aren't things that people do every day. And so when looking at this data, one has to be careful. We're going to be analyzing surface transport modes for the travel demand model. And as I said, you'll see a different version of this chart later when we complete the modeling analysis. If we go to slide 10, the main takeaway here is just to reinforce in numbers format some of the weighting process that I alluded to. We don't need to go into details now, but there is a very lengthy analysis we go through to expand the sample to all the population, and we're going to be doing that and finalizing it, and we're going to be doing a lot more analysis for the model. So if we go to slide 11, I just wanted to pause before I start on the transit stuff to see if anyone has any questions about the household travel survey.
Don't see.
We hear none so far. Jeff, go ahead.
All right, so very quickly, I might skip a few slides to stay on time here. The accompanying transit on-board survey tried, well, I should say it didn't try, but succeeded in looking at the People Mover services and the Eagle River Connect services. And the table on the left simply shows the targeted survey response rate for each route. And as you can see, that's a 10% target. The reason for that is, as I already mentioned in the context of the household travel survey, the more sample we get, the more reliable the statistical results are. And the second reason for this is that if you folks are going to go for FTA new starts or small starts money, FTA likes to see analyses based on a 10% sample of the riding folks. So the goal was 10%. If you go to the next slide, 13, the main takeaway here is that we achieved the 10% sample plus some. So I'm happy as a modeler, and you folks will be happy then if you ever chase federal money for transit using this data. Similar to the household travel survey, there was comparable outreach and non-English speaker provision. It was done in the fall of last year. And there's a few interesting findings here. I won't go into lots of these details, but if you go to slide 14, please, talks about rider characteristics. I'm just calling this to your attention because it might be useful for your planning purposes, but it's very important for our modeling purposes. The chart on the left shows typical riders by number of vehicles in household across the entire survey. And in this case, this is the weighted or expanded survey. And you can see that whether they're riding on the weekdays or the weekends, the black bars being the weekends, the majority of your riders are from households that don't have a car. The table on the right, or chart on the right, shows an income distribution of the surveyed riders expanded to all the riders in the system. And consistent with the no car finding, a large component of your ridership are from low income brackets. So this is just important because it helps us make sure the model is forecasting things correctly, but it also speaks to the types of users that you typically see in your system. We'll be doing more analysis for this for the model, so again, you'll be seeing more versions of these charts later. There are geographic details to both surveys that will help us understand where trips are coming from and going to. If you skip to slide 17, please, Reese. Similar to the household travel survey, we will be doing a lot more detailed analysis with the weighted data set and using the results of that to inform the travel model update. Both data sets from these two surveys are in the hands of AMATS staff, as are final reports that summarize some of these findings. And so there are many more details available if folks want. And with that, I'll conclude and take any final questions.
Any questions from the public? Board members, any questions? I think we have no questions at this time. Thank
We have
you.
no questions, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome. Thanks for listening.
Is that it, Teresa, or do you have any follow-up on that?
That's it.
Okay. So I guess we're moving on to item C then, which is February 2035 MTP schedule and update. Is that correct?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Vivian Underwood. I'm a Senior Transportation Planner with the Municipality of Anchorage and staff to AMATS. The 2035 interim MTP is on schedule, I'm glad to say, and we need to thank the DOT and PF for allowing us to use their procurement process, which speeded up things for us. We're about 2 weeks behind, but we were able to sign a contract, the DOT was, with PDC Engineers, Inc., and Brian here is here today. He's the project manager. And we are still on schedule. We plan to have a draft to the Technical Advisory Committee in May. A first draft, they'll give us their comments, and then we'll get a public involvement draft, a public review draft to them in June, and hopefully it will come to you in June as well. We also had a good news. Mr. Lyons spoke with Jerry Weaver, the director of the Community Development Department, and Erica McConnell, who's the project manager for current planning. And those two decided that this interim MTP does not need to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission because there is nothing new in the plan. There's no changes. There are no additions or deletions. The only thing that's changed is we've updated some project cost information and refreshed the financial plan, which just basically will show the same thing, that's physically constrained. Those are the main things, and we're updating the socioeconomic projections very minimally just for population, households, and employment. We're not going to go into a huge long exercise with that because the model isn't finished yet. So we're using the 2035 modeling that was done. And what we still are not aware of yet is where we are with the assembly. We haven't heard back if this needs to go to the assembly yet or not. And I think that we would appreciate some feedback from our assembly members on
I did provide feedback. Basically, I didn't, I thought the assembly still would want to see it.
as an information item or
As an information
as a business item. Oh, I'd be glad to. There's something new we're doing with this. We've never really done an annual report or a progress report on what AMATS has done. And so Chapter 8 is the implementation plan, and the interim MTP is going to follow the same chapter structure, but instead of just regurgitating what we said we were going to do in 2012, we're taking this opportunity to do a report card on ourselves, to share with the public the things that we have been working on. And it'll be highlights, and we don't want to bore everybody to death, but there's some good things that have happened since 2012. There are 40 action items that were supposed to have been done or were recommended to be done in the 0 to 5 year time frame after 2012. And I'm glad to say that of those 40, we've taken action on or completed 37 of those. So that's about 93% and about 75% of the time. So I think that's a good report on our activities. So does anybody have any questions?
Well, let me ask the public first, as always. Does anybody from the public have any questions about the MTP schedule update? Seeing none. Committee members? Mr. Steele?
When's the, when are we shooting for, I know the schedule you gave, but is there a deadline that we have to get the interim plan in by?
Yes,
Or is
because
that-
we're using the 2035
Yeah.
projections, the lifetime of the plan is a 20-year horizon.
Okay.
So it has to be approved.
This year.
Yes, at the end of 2015. Thank you.
Any other questions? Questions? Thank you. Great, does that complete our rigorous calendar for the day?
That's all I have.
Okay. So I'll give everybody the upcoming meetings and workshops. Freight Advisory Committee is April 24th from 2 to 4. Technical Advisory is May 14th from 2:30 to 4:30. Our next Policy Committee is right back here on May 28th at 1:30. There's also a Bikeway Design Workshop June 24th from 6 to 9. Concludes our meeting. We are adjourned.